SCP-5000.
Oh, shit.
Gunshots echo down the concrete hallway of Site-22. Screams are the only thing that escape each room. A team of men in all black combat gear and masks move from one section of the complex to the next. Pietro Wilson hides in his office, listening to the cries for mercy of his colleagues. He shakes uncontrollably with fear. Who are they? He thinks. Why are they killing everyone? And how did they find us? Moments earlier, Pietro Wilson had been in the canteen eating dinner with other staff members. A group of heavily armed men entered the room. They stood silently surveying the area. One of the scientists stood up and asked if they could assist them. That's when the carnage started. One of the masked men raised his rifle and shot the scientist in the head. Chaos broke out as the other mercenaries raised their weapons and began firing. Bullets flew everywhere, and Pietro was lucky not to be struck or trampled as he escaped out the back door of the cafeteria. He ran to his office, slammed the door shut, and hid under his desk. Now he sits on the floor, with his legs pulled up to his chest, shaking uncontrollably. After a couple of minutes, he manages to take a deep breath and slows his heart rate. He regains control of his body, but is still filled with fear and adrenaline.
What is going on?
Pietro crawls on his belly to his office door. He reaches up and pulls down on the handle. There's a slight click.
What is this? Is this number 2? Is there a first one? It's the wrong one. Okay, so watch the second one. I'm confused as fuck. Motherfucker's 45 minutes. You have time. You're actually right. I really do have fucking time. I just... Alright. Fuck it.
SCP-5000. Why? The
What?
SCP Foundation is an organization cemented in its goal of using its considerable resources and capabilities to protect humanity from the anomalous. One of the questions we'll be looking at today, however...
Nope. Motherfucker, this shit's hard. Minecraft? Give me a goddamn different SCP, like, just to look up. Fuck, I'm just gonna type in SCP and see which ones get recommended. Slow burn sloth. 7 hours ago. There's that one. Bigfoot? The fuck? What's an SCP? It's real. That's all you need to know about SCP is it's all real. That's it. Fuck it. Time to watch Bigfoot.
Joseph and Frank were two lifelong squatchers. No, that isn't an insult. That's a self-given title for Bigfoot enthusiasts who are willing to head out into the woods and search for the legendary Sasquatch firsthand.
Yeah.
While most squatchers will go their whole lives without ever encountering one, Joseph and Frank were about to get lucky. They just didn't know what kind of luck. During a journey through the forests of the Pacific Northwest, Frank spotted something moving in the distance. A huge ape-like creature with grayish fur and human-like movements. Frank thought he was finally laying eyes on the mighty Bigfoot after decades of searching. What he didn't know was that he just made a deadly mistake. He had looked directly at SCP-1000, and there would be terrible consequences.
Was it Shy Guy?
Frank was excited. He just achieved the life goal of any squatcher. He tapped Joseph on the shoulder and directed him to look in the direction of the creature. Joseph followed Frank's direction and stared into the distance. When his eyes finally came into focus on the ape-like beast, he froze. His brain just short-circuited. 1 second he was about to encounter the holy grail of his hobby, and the next, he was literally brain dead. Joseph collapsed. In the distance, the ape-like creature disappeared back into the woods. Not that Frank even noticed. He was too busy trying to wake Joseph, but it was no use. Joseph was gone, and Frank had no idea why. The headlines read, "Bigfoot killed my friend." Most people either ignored it or laughed it off. Just a couple of cranks goofing off in a forest and one of them had dropped dead. Who cares? Well, one organization cared. The SCP Foundation. Mobile Task Force Zeta 1000. The Foundation's specialized SCP-1000 detail were alerted to the reports. They sprang into action, tracking down and detaining Frank for questioning. They process 1 million loony Bigfoot lovers every year and usually find nothing, but the death of Frank's friend made it all too clear. They hadn't encountered a Bigfoot, but a real, genuine example of SCP-1000. SCP-1000 rarely ranks among the scariest or most dangerous SCPs, but underestimating the creature is a terrible mistake, because just looking at it gives you a 2% chance of dropping dead on the spot. Frank,
2% what?
despite losing his friend, was one of the lucky ones. The Foundation debriefed him before administering amnestics and making sure that he never ventured back into those mysterious forests in the Pacific Northwest region. Director Jones, the site director charged with the management of SCP-1000 populations, was given the information on this latest case of an SCP-1000 related fatality. It was a story he heard many times before. For Director Jones, they all seem to bleed into one another. So what exactly is SCP-1000? And how did it leave poor Joseph dead in the woods? SCP-1000 is a whole species of large hominid ape-like creatures. They're largely nocturnal, but sightings of the creature during the day aren't unheard of. They're omnivorous, mostly seeming to consume plants and insects, and their
Wait,
fur
there's
is
more than
usually
one?
gray, brown, black, red, or occasionally white.
I knew Bigfoot was real.
The creatures have large eyes capable of impressive vision nestled underneath a pronounced Neanderthal-like brow. Another defining feature is the ridge of bone on the forehead, much like that of a gorilla, that is present in both sexes. According to Foundation studies, the creatures exhibit a level of intelligence on par with that of the common chimpanzee, but nowhere near that of us humans. What they lack in intelligence, though, they make up for in size. The adults can be as large as 10 feet tall and weigh up to 600 pounds. Despite their great size and impressive strength, the creatures are neither aggressive nor territorial. In fact, they seem to instinctively avoid humans, mostly residing deep in the forests of the American Pacific Northwest and in the Himalayan Alps. There have been sightings of SCP-1000 on every continent, though the Foundation has taken pains to exterminate all SCP-1000 populations situated near human population centers to prevent a potential disaster, considering the 2% chance of instantaneous death upon visual contact. That brings us to our second question.
But how do they
What
come up
is
with
it
the
that makes
fucking
these seemingly harmless creatures so dangerous? Sadly, for both these unfortunate creatures and us humans, the danger is beyond the control of SCP-1000. According to Foundation research, SCP-1000 likely evolved alongside us Homo sapiens until a tragedy occurred between 10 and 15,000 years ago. A mysterious extinction event eliminated the vast majority of their species, leaving only 1 to 5% alive in the aftermath. What happened?
That's unlucky.
It's believed that around this time, SCP-1000 contracted what the Foundation refers to as an anomalous pseudo-disease. Meet SCP-1000-F1. A disease that is passed along at the genetic level and is so durable that it persists in the species to this day. The tiny fraction of the population that are immune to its effects manage to survive, but the majority who aren't immune die shortly after birth. This is why the overall population remains relatively low to this day.
Wow.
It's a disease that only appears to affect hominids, including humans, chimpanzees, bonobos, and non-immune instances of SCP-1000. Any hominid that lays eyes on a carrier of the disease has a 2% chance of experiencing immediate brain death. While a 2% chance of instant death may not seem all that threatening, at least when compared to some other nightmare-inducing SCPs, the truly scary part is that the percentage is cumulative. In other words, the longer one observes a carrier of SCP-1000-F1, the higher that percentage rises, the greater your chance of experiencing an abrupt death. According to Foundation studies, the percentage rises by around 1% every 20 minutes, and the percentage also varies between specimens, with some exhibiting
Fail
a
stacks.
terrifyingly high death chance of 90% upon viewing. This death chance continues to occur in dead specimens if they carry the anomalous pseudovirus
You gotta
while
stop
alive.
saying my name. I'm getting
Though thankfully
overloaded.
the risk doesn't appear to apply to small fur or tissue samples. The Foundation's true concern actually goes far beyond SCP-1000 themselves. Because of the species' close relation to Homo sapiens, there's a worry that SCP-1000-F1 could transmit to humans, causing our own species to meet a similar fate. If humans did indeed become carriers of SCP-1000-F1, it's extremely likely that humanity would undergo an unprecedented extinction event, with billions across the globe dropping dead as brain death sets in en masse. While full extermination of the entire
That's
species has
badass.
been deemed unlikely, this existential threat they pose to humanity more than justifies the occasional culling of SCP-1000 populations. That was a lot to take in, right?
Holy fuck, a
First, the
coaling?
creature we thought was Bigfoot was actually a new species of SCP out in the wild. And second, these creatures could end human life as we know it if they made it into a population center. But what you're about to hear next, a dark secret only available to people with level 3 SCP Foundation clearance, is the most shocking SCP-1000 fact of all. Are you
Okay,
ready?
I'm ready.
The true secret of SCP-1000 is that what you've just heard is a lie. There is no anomalous pseudo-disease, and SCP-1000 poses no pathogenic threat to humanity whatsoever. Who would spread such a thing? The SCP Foundation, of course. Strictly speaking, the Foundation has disseminated 2 direct lies about the nature of SCP-1000. The first is that of the disease, which does not exist, nor has it ever existed. The second lie is about the creature's intelligence level. They're far smarter than the average chimp. In fact, they're every bit as intelligent as human beings. These were all lies formulated by Director Jones and the Foundation, as was the very existence of the Bigfoot myth. The Foundation has been spreading information that makes the very concept of the Sasquatch out to be a joke for decades, all to discredit and further push the very concept of SCP-1000 into the shadows.
I knew it!
But why? The Foundation is no stranger to coming up with cover stories, but why would they put intentional lies into their own files to anyone below a level 3 clearance? Well, that all comes down to the horrifying truth behind the origins of today's SCP-1000 population. The creatures were first brought to the attention of the Foundation by outcast members of the Serpent's Hand, an organization dedicated to defying the Foundation's activities. These members, known as the Children of the Sun, told them the secret history of SCP-1000. Well, at first, Foundation personnel like Director Jones didn't want to believe what they were hearing. They soon came to terms with the horrifying truth. Humans and SCP-1000 did evolve alongside each other, with humans occupying the day and SCP-1000 the night. However, while humans were still basic hunter-gatherers, SCP-1000 were undergoing vast intellectual and societal development. They were able to create tools, weapons, agriculture, stable settlements, domesticated animals, and eventually even fully developed cities. It was like nothing the world had ever seen, and wouldn't see for thousands of years to come. Their numbers swelled into the tens of billions as they created culture and technology hitherto unimagined, including weapons of devastating power. Meanwhile, humanity was pushed to the brink of destruction by their competitors' rapid and seemingly unstoppable growth. It looked as though the human species had lost the evolutionary arms race and would have to bow out. But according to the Children of the Sun, a trickster forest god smiled upon humanity and gave them the power to use SCP-1000's weapons and technology against them.
What the fuck is
70%
going on?
of SCP-1000's population were wiped out in a single horrific day, known to the Children of the Sun as the Day of the Flowers, as every flower supposedly bloomed that day during the massacre. Humanity destroyed the entire civilization, and with the same technology they stole from these unfortunate creatures, the vengeful humans drove the apes mad. Their higher consciousnesses were blocked out, reducing them back into the states of mere animals. Once the massacre was done and everything that was built had been destroyed, we, the human race, used the SCP-1000 weapons to wipe any memory of the atrocity from our own minds. The advanced civilization of SCP-1000 had been wiped from history. Humans returned to their plodding path of evolution, none the wiser.
Dude,
For
that's so
thousands of
real.
years, all the way up until today, this time remained a mystery to us. So again, why did the Foundation lie to us? What did they have to gain by convincing us all that it was dangerous to even look at these creatures? Well, as the frequency of sightings and the attempts of communication increased, people like Director Jones became aware of a frightening possibility. What if the pendulum was swinging back? What if the apes were regaining their lost intelligence and, worse, still harbored feelings of revenge for what we did to their species thousands of years ago? Even the mere possibility that they could do to
Yep,
us
keep
what
calling
we
'em.
once did to them is a chance that the Foundation simply cannot take, and thus, limiting contact between humans and SCP-1000 at all costs is an absolute must. However, in spite of the Foundation's fears, one intercepted message from the apes suggests that their paranoia may be misplaced. This message, translated from an attempt at communicating with Foundation personnel, reads simply as follows: "We forgive you. Given choice for now, not forever, let us back in." It's enough to make you wonder what species the Foundation should really be keeping tabs on here. After all, when it comes to meting out violence and death, humanity has a track record to rival the worst creatures in the Foundation containment cells, and few examples illustrate that better than the tragic case of SCP-1000.
God dang. Okay. So there's that. Let's see another one. Let's try this possessive mask.
The SCP Foundation does their best to live up to their famous namesake. They secure and contain anomalies and monsters from all around the world, or sometimes even off-world, and protect the public from the dangers that these strange entities might pose. However, despite their efforts to maintain security and keep their subjects under lock and key, there are sometimes creatures so clever, so devious, and so determined to escape their captivity and wreak havoc on the world that even the SCP Foundation struggles to keep them from getting free. One example is SCP-035, or the Possessive Mask.
Whoa.
SCP-035 is one of the most dangerous test subjects in SCP Foundation custody, and its mere presence at the Foundation has resulted in untold damage, death, and destruction. It seems innocent enough to the untrained eye. The mask, which resembles a classic white porcelain comedy mask, though it occasionally changes its expression to tragedy, has been in existence since at least the 1800s. In the late 19th century, the Foundation discovered the mask in a sealed crypt beneath an abandoned home in Venice. It is unknown how it got there, or how the Foundation knew to look for it. If there was ever an explanation for its discovery, it has long since been removed or redacted from the Foundation's archives. You're probably wondering, how can a simple mask leave multiple seasoned Foundation employees dead? Well, like everything at the SCP Foundation, this mask is not what it seems. There's a reason its classification is Keter, a designation that refers to an entity that's excessively difficult to contain, and it couples this difficulty with a pronounced hostility towards human life, and the ability to cause widespread destruction in the event of a containment breach. These are the qualities that the poor unfortunate souls assigned to guard SCP-035 would come to understand all too well.
Imagine working at that fucking
mask
facility.
is a parasitic entity,
Fuck
constantly
that.
seeking out a host willing to put it on. Any human being in the mask's proximity experiences a sudden, unexplainable urge to put it on, and once they do, there's no going back. SCP Foundation research has determined that once a host has put on the mask, their brain waves are replaced with an alternative pattern, this one coming from the mask, rendering the host effectively brain dead. Once the host's brain function has been eliminated, the mask takes over, piloting their body and even speaking through them. However, the mask can only occupy a host for a small amount of time before the body begins to decay and decompose, eventually rotting away completely, leaving nothing but desiccated flesh and bones where there once was a person. SCP-035 is capable of possessing any humanoid being, whether that's an actual human being or a lifeless humanoid shape. Despite all their research, the SCP Foundation unknowingly gave the mask all the tools and resources it needed to break containment and leave a trail of bodies in its wake. For a time, the mask was given host privileges, meaning that it was purposely allowed to occupy a host in order to speak with the scientists studying it. In order to avoid murky ethical issues, the host was usually something inanimate like a mannequin or a statue. These conditions, however unsettling, allowed the researchers to carry out interviews with the consciousness housed inside the mask, in the hope of beginning to understand it and its motivations. However, SCP-035 lost all access to its host privileges after it almost pulled off an unprecedented, shocking, and nearly catastrophic escape attempt. In its early days at the facility, when it was still allowed host privileges, it was contained in a triple-locked room and monitored by several research personnel. These were experienced researchers who had been with the Foundation for a minimum of 5 years each, an unusually long tenure in such a dangerous and mentally corrosive line of work. These research staff members were thought to be the most capable of handling interactions with the mask and be able to resist its attempts at manipulation. Unfortunately, these assumptions were naive and seriously underestimated the mask's
Unlucky.
power. Research on the mask indicates that the mask is incredibly intelligent and a skilled manipulator. It has a photographic memory, intelligence that would rank it in the 99th percentile of humans, and the ability to incite dramatic changes in the behavior and people that it talks to. One particularly infamous interview between the entity and an unnamed doctor at the Foundation suggested that the mask may even possess telepathic abilities. The mask was able to give details about the doctor's life that no one else was privy to, including knowledge of an affair that his wife was having. Following the interview, the doctor suffered a psychotic break and committed suicide just 24 hours later. The mask is able to use its superior intelligence, charismatic personality, and mind-reading abilities to get inside the heads of those it speaks with. It will pull out any and all psychological stops to get what it wants, leaving broken minds and spirits in its wake. It was really only a matter of time before it used this skill set to its advantage and attempted to escape its confinement. The day of the escape attempt was like any other. The research staff, a team of 3 intelligent, experienced men, checked into the facility, measured the conditions of the mask's containment unit, and began the process of interviewing the mask like normal. Its motions were slow and looked to require great effort, as its current host was beginning to degrade beyond use. The mask was attached to the blank face of a mannequin, and corrosive black liquid could be seen oozing from its eye and mouth holes. This liquid is excreted by the mask at a near constant rate, and it's thought to be at least partially responsible for the accelerated decay of the host bodies. In spite of the entity's unsettling, nightmarish appearance, it was just another day's work for the men assigned to monitor SCP-035, and so they carried on with their daily routine. Everything was going according to plan until one of the men, Dr. Jones, began to behave erratically. He demanded that his fellow scientists leave him alone with the mask for a while, and allow him to engage in a private conversation with it. It is unknown what exactly the two spoke about while the other 2 scientists were absent, as the security footage captured had no sound. However, several minutes into the conversation in the footage, Dr. Jones can be seen dissolving into a fit of tears, laying on the ground and shaking with sobs as the mask dispassionately watches. He then climbs onto his knees, begging the mask for something, before he embraces it. He holds the mannequin in his arms for 5 straight minutes, weeping again before they separate. After this disturbing emotional display, Dr. Jones brought the other scientists back into the room with him. What happened next is still uncertain, but there are a few things that we know for sure. The other scientists began to speak with the mask. In later interviews, the other scientists were bordering on incoherent babbling about various traumas from their lives. One repeatedly referred to a drunk driving accident where a dear friend was killed, and he was at fault. Another simply cried out for his mother again and again. Whatever the mask said to them, it was enough to completely destroy their mental health. After the 2 scientists had been emotionally devastated by the mask, Dr. Jones escalated the situation further. Dr. Jones removed the mask from the decaying mannequin body, and shocking everyone who had later reviewed the security footage, placed it onto his own face. Once the mask was in place, the security footage ends. At the command of the mask, which was now speaking through Dr. Jones, the other 2 men switched off all security camera monitoring SCP-035's containment facility. The mask, piloting the body of Dr. Jones like a horrible fleshy puppet, made its way through the facility, avoiding detection until it reached the exit doors, where it was finally stopped by a team of over a dozen security guards. Knowing the dangers of touching the mask, all Foundation employees involved in the recontainment of SCP-035 refused to remove it from Dr. Jones' face. Instead, he was placed in the lock room with the mask still on, left alone to be observed over the security cameras until his body had decomposed beyond use. His body paced back and forth in the cell for days, flesh rotting and dropping away only until sinew and bone remained. Only when the bones began to turn black and brittle, crumbling apart into dust, did the body finally stop moving. His family was notified. The mask was carefully removed from what was left of his body, and his remains were destroyed. The other 2 scientists involved in the SCP-035 escape attempt were terminated and their files destroyed. After this incident, a few more failed escape attempts, and the acknowledgement of the devastation that could have been caused if the mask had made its way out into the general population, SCP-035 lost its host privileges altogether. Several research staff protested this decision, insisting that there was more to be learned from speaking with the entity, and citing valuable information that it had given about other SCPs. However, the risk was determined to considerably outweigh the potential reward, and the request to reinstate 035's host privileges were denied. Several staff members went so far as to erupt into violent outbursts on 035's behalf, attacking their supervisors who refused to provide the mask with a new host. clawing at them with animalistic rage. Any staff members that submitted a request to reinstate said privileges were considered a security threat,
Holy shit.
reassigned to a different SCP, or in some cases, terminated. Any staff member who had direct contact with SCP-035 was also terminated, in order to avoid the risk of any more staff-aided escape attempts. The mask is now kept in a hermetically sealed glass case, and there is a psychologist on call to provide assistance to anyone guarding it, in case of adverse effects on their mental health from the mask's presence.
They got an
Personnel that
on-duty
work around the
therapist.
mask, even in its current dormant state, experience frequent violent outbursts and a higher rate of suicide. Even without a host, the mask's corrosive effects have spread across its containment facility. The walls of the room have begun to secrete the same black liquid that emanates from the mask, which tests have revealed to be highly contaminated human blood that damages the structural integrity of the walls following prolonged contact. This blood has begun to form patterns on the walls, spelling out words and phrases in Italian, Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit, as well as depicting drawings of ritual sacrifice and mutilation. Staff members also report hearing unintelligible whispering and horrifying high-pitched laughter when in proximity to the mask. Further exposure to the mask results in migraines, hemorrhaging around the eyes, mouth, and nose, and an eventual psychotic break. Between the corrosive substance appearing on the walls and the physical and psychological damage to employees, SCP-035 is becoming increasingly difficult to contain, and there are debates among staff as to whether the entity can, in fact, be contained at all. As soon as possible, SCP-035 will be moved into a new containment facility, and its previous cell will be isolated from the rest of the Foundation's property and destroyed for the safety of all involved. We can only hope that the new containment procedures are more effective than the last ones, and that this mask never makes its way into the world again. If it does, who knows how many lives it will claim. In the meantime, if you ever come across a strange mask and feel a nearly uncontrollable urge to put it on, ignore the whispered pleas to just try.
Okay.
Ignore the echoing laughter and the sensation of something older and more powerful than you can imagine rummaging through your deepest, darkest secret thoughts.
I'm gonna
Turn
keep that in
around
mind.
And run as fast as you can in the
Okay.
other direction. You'll be glad that you did.
Huh. I don't know what's up with all these SCPs leaking some type of fucking liquid. Alright, give me another one. I still got more grinding I have to fucking do. I've already seen the IKEA one. Baba Yaga? There's a possessive mask again. Old man? The fuck? The Baba Yaga one's good? Okay, we'll do that one. Where the fuck are you, bitch?
Are you familiar with the Russian sleep experiment? It's the granddaddy of
352 will first remove and eat the limbs of her prey to prevent
I
it
haven't
from
seen that.
wandering away, and then take several days to fully devour the rest of it. Humans have been observed to still be in a euphoric state and have no knowledge of the outside world, even as they suffer the loss of limbs and other bodily tissue. Hello everybody, I'm the Rubber. Today we bring you SCP Foundation Keter Class Object SCP-352. SCP-352, also known as Baba Yaga, appears to be an incredibly old, emaciated woman of indeterminate age and race. 352 speaks Old Russian, but with an accent and dialect that makes it even harder to understand and translate. 352 usually does not converse with any of the members of the SCP Foundation, but when she does, her words come off as threats of revenge or bodily harm. 352 has never identified herself by any name, and due to her aggressive nature, it has been impossible to determine any background information. SCP-352 possesses a level of strength and speed much higher than what should be possible for a person of her perceived age and physical dimensions, and has been shown moving loads in excess of 200 kilograms with little physical strain, and moving at speeds in excess of 70 kilometers per hour. 352 can recover from wounds that would be lethal to a human being, including decapitation and disemboweling. This regeneration can take between several days to several weeks, depending on severity. Internally, 352 appears to be a normal human woman, with muscles, bones, and organs in a state consistent
bitch
with
is
her
not
advanced
normal.
age. SCP-352 is capable of growing very thin, hair-like strands from any part of her body, apparently at will. These strands can grow several meters in an hour and appear to be at least partially under the control of 352. They have been observed crawling along floors and up walls and other structures. These hairs are clear and nearly invisible to the naked eye and appear to be slightly weaker than standard human hair. The strands are also coated in a thin layer of chemical enzyme identical to the enzyme in the saliva of 352. SCP-352 produces an enzyme that is most concentrated in the saliva and hair, but is present in all bodily tissues of 352. How it is produced and its exact chemical makeup are unknown. This enzyme reacts when contact with human tissue and rapidly attacks the nervous system. Anyone who comes into contact with the enzyme will experience symptoms almost immediately, which include hallucinations, euphoria, suppression of cognitive or logical thinking, and suppression of pain receptors. This state will persist for several days if the exposure to the enzyme is mild and can become permanent with high exposure. Unfortunately, bites from 352 will lead to high exposure in 99.9% of cases. SCP-352 appears to subsist on a carnivorous diet with a strong preference for human flesh. 352 will create a web of hair and wait for prey to become exposed to the enzyme and become more docile. Once she has her prey within her grasp, 352 will first remove and eat the limbs of her prey to prevent it from wandering away, and then take several days to fully devour the rest of it. Humans have been observed to still be in a euphoric state and have no knowledge of the outside world, even as they suffer the loss of limbs and other bodily tissue. SCP-352 prefers any type of human flesh over any other type of meat. While 352 kills and eats any human that she comes across, she prefers to feed on children between the ages of 0 to 2. After observation of 352 highly elevated levels of cooperation and a reduced tendency to attack staff while consuming flesh of this type, a possible alteration in the current diet is being considered. Personnel who works at 352's containment site requested the use of SCP-604 and SCP-1680 as a more efficient food source for 352. SCP-604 is a set of tableware and dishes. Some are studded with diamonds and rubies, and some are made from fine materials such as porcelain and crystal. Whenever an edible solid is placed onto one of the plates or a liquid is poured into one of the drink vessels, the food will transform into human flesh, or the nearest equivalent organ, body part, or fluid. For example, fleshy steaks will turn into cuts from the thigh, and red wine or juices into human blood. If 604 is used as 352's food source, there is no need to sacrifice innocent human infants. On the other hand, SCP-1680 is a collection of identical humanoid entities. Through genetic testing, 1680 has been determined to be an exact replica of Tyler Buchanan, an 8-year-old boy declared missing on the 11th of February 2007. Instances of 1680 are 137 centimeters in height and 38.5 kilograms in mass upon acquisition. Each instance of SCP-1680 believes itself to be Tyler Buchanan and possesses identical memories up to the day of his disappearance. Genetic testing has concluded that each instance is genetically identical to one another and to the original Tyler Buchanan. Each instance of 1680 demonstrates extreme emotional distress when exposed to other copies of 1680.
Well, no shit.
However, due to unknown reason, the request for using 604 and 1680 is currently still pending for approval from the project director. SCP-352 was discovered in a southern Russian town. Reports of an enchanted forest and a witch who had caused several deaths were initially ignored, until reports of the witch being found and captured began to surface. When Foundation agents responded and headed out to investigate, the town was found deserted. Several bodies were found in varying states of decomposition, and blood trails appeared to show many more bodies being dragged into the enchanted forest. The Foundation agents were able to capture 352, but they had suffered major casualties due to SCP-352's attack and exposure to the enzyme. A large amount of hair was recovered as well, and is believed to be the cause of many exposure incidents, with contact being attributed to spider webs or an agent's own hair and not reported until hallucinations manifested. After the successful capture of 352, this old lady was then put into a containment area that is to remain sealed at all times. No human interaction is allowed with 352. All interaction should be carried out via robot or other remote means. If human interaction become necessary, full hazmat containment protocols should be observed, and full hazmat suit should be worn at all times. In addition, security lines must be attached to all personnel. Should any personnel begin to exhibit erratic behavior, they are to be immediately removed from the containment area via the security lines. Any staff reporting hallucinations after interaction with 352 or her hair are to immediately be placed under quarantine. Any staff working in or around the containment area must submit to random psychological and physical testing. Anyone found to be contaminated will be placed into immediate quarantine.
Okay, I'm done
Staff
farming.
attacked by SCP-352 may only be recovered if they have not been bitten by 352. 352 is to be fed only once a week. Feeding will be discontinued for 1 month if 352 attacks any personnel. Although 352's containment area is always sealed, but one time, SCP-3783-1 instances managed to break in, and 2 of which had interacted with SCP-352. SCP-3783-1 instances are mutated biological organisms after entering SCP-3783. 3783 is a single-roomed log cabin that
Okay, I'm gonna have to watch this in a second. I gotta do this thingamajig. Get fucked. Sorry if you're interested. You gotta go watch the end yourself if you want to go see it. I gotta focus on this.